to. The waiting room was too quiet for a place that claimed to celebrate innovation. Soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers, the kind meant to calm nerves, but it only made the silence heavier. Glass walls separated the room from the offices beyond, where people moved confidently, laughing, holding coffee cups with the company logo printed neatly on the side. Elijah Moore sat in the last chair near the corner. He wore a fitted charcoal blazer, a clean white shirt, dark trousers, polished shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing careless. Pete's posture was relaxed, his hands resting calmly on his lap. His resume sat neatly in a leather folder beside him, untouched. On the wall opposite him hung a large framed poster. "We value diversity." The words were bold, colorful, impossible to miss. Elijah had arrived 15 minutes early. He always did. Not because he was anxious, but because he believed preparation was respectable for himself and for the people evaluating him. Yet, despite his punctuality, he noticed something immediately. Every other candidate had already been called in. Jorge, a young white man with a confident smile, had gone first. He returned 10 minutes later, laughing quietly into his phone. A white woman in a beige suit had followed. She came out nodding, cheeks flushed with excitement. Another candidate. Another smile. Elijah remained seated. No one acknowledged him. A receptionist finally glanced up, eyes flicking toward him for half a second before returning to her screen. Elijah checked his watch. 5 minutes past his scheduled time. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't new. Hugh had learned long ago that waiting itself could be a test not of patience, but of how much inconvenience someone believed you deserved. When his name was finally called, it sounded rushed, almost reluctant. "Ooh, Elijah Moore," he stood smoothly, offering a polite nod. "Yes." The receptionist gestured toward a hallway without meeting his eyes. Elijah walked past glass offices where executives discussed projects, unaware or uninterested in what this moment represented for him. He entered the interview room. The interviewer, a white man in his late 40s named Richard Hawley, barely looked up from his tablet. "Have a seat," Richard said flatly. Elijah sat. Richard scanned the screen, lips pursed. "So, Elijah." He said the name like it required effort. "Yes," Elijah replied calmly. Richard glanced at him briefly. "You're applying for the senior data analyst role." "That's correct." Richard nodded slowly. "You have quite an extensive background." Elijah waited. Richard leaned back. "I'll be honest. This position requires a certain cultural fit." There it was. Elijah met his eyes. "Can you clarify what you mean by that?" Richard smiled thinly. "We move fast here, hip pressure. Environment. Not everyone adjusts well. I've worked in environments like that for over 10 years, Elijah said, including roles more demanding than this one." Richard hummed, unconvinced. "Your resume is impressive on paper." On paper. Elijah felt the familiar tightening in his chestnut anger. Not surprise, but recognition. Richard continued. "Tell me about a time you struggled to adapt." Elijah answered clearly, confidently, offering concrete examples. Richard nodded, but his eyes drifted back to the tablet again and again, as if the decision had already been made. Then came the questions that never appeared on official lists. "Where did you grow up?" Elijah paused. "How is that relevant to the role?" Richard smiled again. "Just getting to know you." "I grew up in 3 different cities," Elijah replied. "My background taught me adaptability." Richard scribbled something. "Do you feel comfortable working under authority?" "Yes." "With little supervision?" "Yes." "With people who may not share your experiences?" Elijah held his gaze. Diverse environments are where I do my best work. The interview ended quickly after that. No handshake, no smile, just a polite dismissal. HR will be in touch, Richard said, already turning back to his screen. Elijah stood. Thank you for your time. Outside, the waiting room was empty now. The poster still hung there, unchanged. We value diversity. Elijah walked out without looking back. In the elevator, his reflection stared back at him, calm face, steady eyes. Anyone watching would think he'd been unaffected. They would be wrong. Back home, Elijah placed his folder on the desk, but didn't open it. Instead, he opened his laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating his face. He logged into a system few people knew existed. Years earlier, Elijah had been part of a small team hired to help design an AI-driven hiring system for the very company that had just rejected him. The system was meant to reduce human bias by standardizing candidate evaluation. That had been the promise. But systems learned from data, and data reflected people. Elijah navigated through archive permissions he's still legally retained as an external consultant. The logs loaded. His heart rate quickened not from fear, but anticipation. Patterns emerged quickly. Candidates with identical qualifications received different scores. The differences were subtle, adjustable, defensible, but consistent. Elijah filtered by race markers, embedded indirectly through proxy zip codes, employment gaps, linguistic patterns. The bias wasn't accidental. Someone had adjusted the weighting. Elijah leaned back slowly. They didn't remove bias, he whispered. They automated it. Over the next 2 days, Elijah worked quietly, methodically. He documented everything: screenshots, comparisons, statistical proof. No emotion, just truth. On the 3rd day, he sent an email. Not to HR. Not to Richard. To the board. Subject line: System Integrity Review, urgent. The response came faster than expected. A meeting was scheduled. This time, the room was different. Executives sat around a long table, expressions guarded. Richard was there too, pale, stiff. Elijah stood at the head of the table, connected to a large screen, spoke calmly. This system was designed to remove bias, he said. Instead, it was trained to hide it. Charts appeared. Data spoke louder than accusation. Silence filled the room. One executive finally spoke. Are you accusing us of discrimination? Elijah shook his head. I'm showing you proof. Richard shifted uncomfortably. You rejected me before the interview began, Elijah continued. The system confirmed what you already believed. No one interrupted. By the end of the meeting, no one questioned the data. They asked questions about damage control instead. When Elijah left the building, the decision was already made. The company announced a full review weeks later. Policies changed. Public statements were crafted carefully. Elijah received an offer. Senior position. Excellent salary. He declined. The recruiter sounded surprised. May I ask, why? Sighs. Elijah smiled softly. I wanted fairness, not permission. Months later, Elijah sat in a different office. Smaller, quieter. His work now focused on auditing systems like the one that had almost erased him. Outside his window, people walked freely, unaware of the algorithms shaping their futures. Elijah understood one thing clearly now. Bias didn't disappear when people stopped saying it out loud. It evolved. And someone had to keep watching. Elijah did not accept the offer, but the company did not simply move on. Weeks passed, and his name continued to surface in internal discussions. The audit he had triggered spread beyond one department. Other teams began checking their systems, not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid of what might already be there. Elijah watched all of this from a distance. From his small office, he reviewed cases sent anonymously by employees who had seen the signs but never had the language to explain them. Promotions that never came. Interviews that ended before they began. Performance reviews filled with vague words like presence, tone, attitude. Words that meant everything and nothing. One evening, as rain tapped lightly against the window, Elijah opened a message from a young black woman working at a tech startup. "I don't know if this counts as racism," she wrote, "but I keep being told I'm almost ready." Almost for 3 years. Elijah read it twice. Then he replied, "It counts if it repeats." He guided her through documenting patterns, saving emails, noting timelines, not to create conflict, but to create clarity. That had become his work now. Not fighting people. Exposing systems. Months later, Elijah was invited to speak at a closed-door industry roundtable. No cameras, no press, just executors, analysts, and policy designers. He stood at the front of the room, hands relaxed at his sides. "I'm not here to accuse," he began. "I'm here to explain." He showed them data from dozens of companies, different logos. Same outcomes. One executive raised a hand. "Are you saying bias is unavoidable?" Elijah shook his head. "I'm saying bias is lazy. It takes effort to unlearn it." Another asked, "Why didn't anyone notice sooner?" Elijah paused. "They did," he said. "They just didn't feel affected by it." The room went quiet. After the session, a man approached him privately. White. Nervous. Senior position. "I built one of those systems," the man admitted. "I never meant for it to do this." Elijah studied him carefully. Intent doesn't change impact. The man nodded slowly. That night, Elijah walked through the city streets, hands in his coat pockets. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement. People passed him without a second glance. For once, he didn't feel invisible. He felt steady. Not long after, the company that had rejected him released a public statement. Carefully worded, carefully vague. But internally, real changes followed restructured hiring processes, third-party audits, transparency requirements. Some employees resisted, others welcomed it. Elisha knew progress was never unanimous. One afternoon, his phone rang unexpectedly. Richard Hale's name appeared on the screen. Elijah considered ignoring it. He answered. "I owe you an apology," Richard said quietly. "No arrogance, no defensiveness. Just exhaustion." Elijah listened. "I thought I was being objective," Richard continued. "But I realized. I trusted my instincts more than evidence." Elijah responded calmly. "Instincts are shaped by environment." There was a long pause. "I'm trying to unlearn," Richard said. Elijah nodded, even though Richard couldn't see it. "That's where it starts." When the call ended, Elijah sat back, staring at the ceiling. He didn't feel victorious. He felt something better. Resolved. Later that year, Elijah helped design a new evaluation framework, this time with full transparency. Every decision traceable. Every rejection accountable. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. On the day the framework launched, Elijah watched as the system processed its first batch of candidates. The data balanced. The results fair. He closed his laptop and leaned back. Somewhere, someone would walk into an interview room tomorrow and be judged on skill alone. Thought mattered. That thought mattered. Elisha turned off the lights in his office and stepped outside. The city breathed around him, unaware of the quiet corrections happening behind the scenes. He pulled his coat tighter and smiled faintly. The interview had been decided once. Not anymore.